Hi guys, I'm Reha and you're about to listen to a BBC Trending podcast. But before you do, just a heads up, it's only audio. Here's just another place to listen to the stuff we make. We're trying something new here. We hope you like it.
Our online world is now littered with terms and themes that have fast become part of our social media experience. We've learnt to use hashtags, memes and GIFs. We've perhaps taken part in a challenge, danced the Harlem Shake, or guessed the colour of a dress, it was blue, or a sound, it was Yanny. But there are, however, other more serious aspects of the internet that we've had to learn to navigate. How to discern fake news from the truth, for example, or what you should do when someone online makes a very direct and real threat on your life. This is the BBC Trending podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of social media. I'm Anisa Subedar. It's known on the internet as trolling. It's a challenging concept to define, as it's become a catch-all term to describe pranks and hoaxes, maybe winding someone up or having a mild disagreement. But then there's the other end of the spectrum, the one that can have serious offline consequences. Ginger Gorman is a journalist and author who had one such threat made, and it led her to write a book about the human fallout of online trolling. She spent 5 years talking to people who troll. She asks why they do it and looks at the impact they have online and in the real world. She looks at the whole range that starts with pranks or hoaxes, but focuses on the very extreme end of trolling, the dangerous predatory trolls, and some of what you're about to hear may well surprise you. It all started in 2010 when Ginger worked on a story about a gay couple who had a little boy via surrogacy.
The story I did was really a warm-hearted feature about that family, and I spent time with a little boy and it all seemed very normal and quite lovely. So I recorded this interview and we chatted, and then 3 years later I was on maternity leave with my second daughter, and those men were arrested in the United States. They had been subject of an international investigation by New Zealand, US and Australian police, and it turned out that they were members of an international paedophile ring and perpetrating horrendous crimes against him.
And you had no idea that was happening when you covered the story?
I had no idea. So those two men didn't have a criminal record at the time that I interviewed them. No, everything appeared normal. Nobody suspected anything. The police stumbled across some information almost by accident 3 years after I had done the interview. So when they were arrested, investigated, charged and convicted, I then became subject of an orchestrated online hate campaign. And that hate campaign was really spurred by conservatives in the US, particularly one man. He is a conservative blogger and journalist in the United States. He wrote this horrendous stuff about me that really was not factually based at all. And he included my Twitter handle, and that's really where the hatred started pouring in.
Give us a flavour of the kind of things he was saying about you online.
He was calling me a propagandist for the gay rights movement. He was talking about me being a dimwit and being incompetent. And he was really saying that I should pay for what I had done, that I essentially somehow should have known that these two men were paedophiles and that I somehow was to blame for the abuse of this child. And he had thousands of followers on Twitter, and he was boasting about thousands of people reading his blog, and that army of people really took up the mantle, and they were tweeting me that I was a paedophile enabler and really that I should pay. And then I just started to get these torrents of hate, and that built up over a few days, pouring into my accounts, and people were writing various blog posts about me that I kept finding. And then really late one night I got this tweet that said, "Your life is over." I realised that my tweets were geolocated, which means that you could see where our house was on Google Maps. You could pinpoint our house. And almost at the same time as we got that death threat, my husband found this photo of our family on a fascist website. with all this commentary at the same time as we got the death threat was really terrifying. And it's hard to describe that sort of cold fear, but Anisa, what I can tell you is I really clearly remember the adrenaline kind of pumping through my body and feeling dizzy, and then hearing my two little girls asleep, breathing in the next room, and thinking, did I just put my kids' lives in danger because of my job as a journalist? And also asking these questions like, what is the nature of this threat? Like, how real is this threat? Where are these people that are threatening me? Are they going to come and kill us in real life? And actually, no one could really tell me the answer to that. Like, I tried to talk to my workplace about it. I tried to talk to the police. I was told to stay off the internet, love. And this is what cyber hate targets face. No one can really help them, or nobody wants to help them.
Is that kind of advice that you're given? And I hear it quite a lot when people say, oh, just ignore it, or just take a break from social media. Does that come from a lack of understanding of what it means to be trolled?
100%. There's so many things that are wrong with that advice. First of all, who can stay off the internet? I mean, we need it. We need it for connectivity to our social circle. We need it for knowledge sharing. We need it to raise our voices, campaign for issues. There are 1,000 ways in which we need the internet. It's like saying stay off the roads, don't drive a car. You can't actually function in modern life without it. The second thing is it's victim blaming. Like, why are you telling the victim to change their behaviour? Why are you not trying to figure out how to stop the perpetrators? And the third thing is it doesn't take into account the seriousness of cyber hate and what the consequences can be. It doesn't stay online. My book links predator trolling, so extreme trolling, where the person is trying to do real life harm to the victim, psychological, physical, or both. So it links that to murder, it links it to terrorism, it links it to domestic violence, it links it to real life stalking, it links it to incitement to suicide. So you can't just say stay off the internet. It doesn't matter whether you're on the internet or not a lot of the time. Someone can still dox you. They can still put all your details online and have strange men turn up to your house in the middle of the night. There's this idea that the internet and social media exist in some kind of fairyland and they're not real, and that is just not true.
We're going to talk about the people that you spoke to as part of your book, but let's start with some very basic definitions. How do you define trolling?
I think it's now used in such a wide and broad way that we don't actually know what it means. So it's essentially used in any circumstance where someone is winding another person up or needling them, and that's offline or online. Even the trolls themselves, with the really powerful trolls who are big presidents of big trolling syndicates, they can't give you a solid definition. I realised I was only interested in the extreme end where people were coming to real life harm, and I call that predator trolling. And what I mean by that is that individuals are using the internet or digital devices to perpetrate harassment in a sustained way against other individuals where it causes real life harm. And so psychological real life harm, physical real life harm, or both. This is a spectrum of behaviour, and it does have at the very mild end some pranks, it does have mild disagreements, and it goes right up to this other behaviour that I'm describing, which is predator trolling. And I think we need to start differentiating this stuff in our minds. And I think one of the things we need to do as well is admit that there's a troll in all of us. Who has not wanted to be more aggressive than usual, more spiteful than usual on the internet? We all do. And the reason that we do is because of the online disinhibition effect, which is just an academic way of saying you can't see the person, you can't read their facial cues. There isn't really the social consequences of saying something online that there would be if you met someone in the supermarket. Like, no one that met me in the supermarket would say to me, I'm going to cut your uterus out and kill your children, but they feel able to do it online. So we can't point the finger at predator trolls and disconnect ourselves from that behaviour entirely. We are all part of this society, and we all need to think about behaviour online and require social norms to apply. So we can't exempt ourselves from this stuff either.
Were you tentative? Were you scared? How did you approach the trolls that you spoke to in your book?
I actually did not understand what I was getting into, to be fair. Like, I did not understand how extreme predator trolling could be. So in that sense, I was a bit naive. And I probably would have approached it very differently if I knew then what I know now.
How would you have done it differently?
I just wasn't security conscious at all, really. I didn't realise when I went to meet Mark, for example, who is a really committed and vicious troll, and he incites people to suicide. He's done some terribly damaging and dangerous things and is a really threatening individual. He does not experience normal human empathy at all. I've been in contact with him for 5 years, and I can say that to you with confidence. I put a call out on Twitter wanting to talk to trolls, and I just thought, I want to know what these guys are about. I'm going to go meet them. And I had that idea that a lot of us have erroneously. These are losers. They're alone in their mum's basement. They're not going to do any harm. They're just warriors behind a keyboard, that kind of thing. And that was so wrong and naive in retrospect, but that's what I thought. And I was frankly shocked that first interview. He talked about operating in these big international syndicates where they were setting out to do harm to rape victims, to people in the LGBTI community, people who have mental health problems. I didn't in a million years dream that's what I was walking into.
I asked Ginger if there were any behavioural patterns we can identify in a troll.
I have to sort of preface this by saying that they are not all the same, and no two trolls I had long-term relationships with were in any way alike, really. But there are some generalizations that we can make. One is the cohort. They're young white men generally, not exclusively, but, these 18 to sort of 35-year-olds. Psychologically, the research is that trolling correlates really strongly with what they call the dark tetrad of personality traits. It's Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism, and sadism. Narcissism is the least correlated, and sadism is the most correlated. So what that means is that trolls want to hurt other people and they take pleasure from it. And that is really something that every one of the serious trolls that I have ever spoken to did admit to, regardless of if they were left or right or just predator trolling. They all admitted to some sadism. The other thing is that really serious trolls have cognitive empathy but not effective empathy. It means that trolls understand how to hurt you, they understand how to press your buttons, but they don't feel for you. They don't empathize with the feelings that you might have of hurt or upsetness. So Mark knows, for example, exactly how to hurt you, but he doesn't care that he's hurting from you and in fact finds it funny.
What do they look for in a person that they identify as a target?
It was actually quite a revelation to me as a cyber hate target, because what I realized is it's just business for them. Like, they're just looking for your weakest point. And if you're fat, it's that you're fat. If you're black, it's that you're black. If you're a woman, it's that you're a woman. If you're a rape victim, it's that you're a rape victim. So it was almost like a light bulb moment for me when I realized that, because the trolling stopped hurting me after that.
Do trolls have a particular political persuasion? I mean, there's a stereotype that perhaps they're all slightly right-leaning with misogynistic tendencies. What did you find?
Trolling isn't necessarily correlated with being right or left. And in fact, there are really severe trolls on both sides and everywhere in between. My book does delve into a lot of trolls who associate with the alt-right. But, there's a case study in there where one of the activists in Australia, she's very, very left-wing. She calls herself a socialist even, I think. But she's been trolled horrendously by the left. So we need to be really careful here with branding this a left or right behaviour. And in fact, Meep Sheep, who's president of quite a right-wing trolling syndicate, he brought this up with me specifically. He said, how come when we troll people, we're cast as these demons, but when left-wing groups employ the exact same tactics, they are not cast in the same light. No one is pulling them up on these same behaviours. And actually, once he said that, I really did start to notice everywhere that it was all shades of people that were doing this in terms of their political leanings. I mean, a lot of the tactics are the same. The doxing is the same. The getting people fired from their job, inciting the pylons. They're the same tactics. So it's a total mistake to say that trolls are right wing.
You said that it's predominantly male dominated. Did you find female trolls?
I certainly did. There was a case where 3 women were all trolling each other horrendously, and they all ended up in court. There's another case study where an Australian Muslim lawyer called Mariam Vaseda, she was being trolled horrendously by a woman, and that woman was charged and convicted under Australia's Criminal Code Act.
Why do you think the social media companies are slow in taking down examples of cyber hate once they've been reported?
Well, what is the cost to them? It doesn't impact their profit if people are harmed and killed as a result of what's happening on their platforms at the moment. There is no reason for them to keep us safe. They say that, of course, we care about user experience because people wouldn't use our platforms if, they didn't feel safe. But that's not true, because until it happens to you, you don't know how much it can harm you. If companies like banks or big organizations were harming us in the way that social media was harming us, governments would be holding them to account. And I'm absolutely baffled as to why this isn't happening. Why aren't our governments legislating so that these companies are accountable? Why aren't they keeping us safe? There's just no possible way that you can argue that online hatred doesn't cause real life harm. I am currently undertaking a course of specialised therapy for trauma in journalism because the material was so dark and so many people died in the course of writing the book. Like, there's a case in there where one of the trolls was a terrorist. He incited a terrorism attack in Garland, Texas, and 2 people were shot. There is a case of the Australian television personality Charlotte Dawson, who had a lot of mental health issues, but she was by all accounts a fabulous person. The hatred against her was so extreme and almost certainly contributed to her decision to end her life. There is the case of a high school shooter who was also a troll. He shot a couple of people and then shot himself. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Where does the onus lie in terms of responsibility for people who are trolled and for the trolls themselves?
Partly the onus is with us being our best humans, bringing our humanity and our empathy to this. But also the structures that keep us safe in society need to be there as well, which they are currently not on the internet. So law enforcement has to do its part. It has to understand the laws. It has to understand the problem and how extreme the problem can be. It has to know how to investigate and has to have the tech skills. So police officers must have the tech skills and the resources to investigate and to prosecute. And the judiciary has to understand this as well. Like, I've had cases that I've heard of where these extreme cyber hate cases come before judges and judges say, what's Twitter? What's Facebook? They can't even understand what this stuff is. So that's the first part of it. But also missing in this conversation are social media companies. They're kind of missing in action. And to me, this is absolutely inexplicable. Like, essentially, they have been bleating about fixing cyber hate since at least 2006, and they're really just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while the ship sinks. And it makes me think they don't want to fix it, because if they wanted to fix it, they would. If they aren't going to keep us safe online, we have to do something about that.
How do you think this would have played out if you had written this book and done your research as a man?
That's an interesting question. I was the precise hate match for the trolls. So I was everything they hated. They hate white women, they hate feminists, they hate Jews, they hate people in mixed race marriages, and, they don't like journalists. But I went in there with radical empathy, and I think they were totally disarmed. I don't know whether most blokes I know would have done that. So certainly in Australian male culture, I don't know if they could have gone in and done it in the same way. And I don't know if the trolls would have responded in the same way.
The very thing that draws the trolls to you is almost the very thing that they needed. You say that you're still in touch with Mark even after the book has been published.
you know that is such a profound thing that you just said, because that's one of the most confusing things about it for me, is that they trust me. And in the case of someone like Meep Sheep, like my actual husband calls him my troll husband because he talks to me so much and he trusts me so much. And I've become friends with him, even though I'm his hate match.
It's a weird kind of Stockholm syndrome where you've befriended and you now have a relationship with the very people that kind of meant you harm.
You know, I really feel that on the world stage at the moment, say if you look at politics, it's so polarizing and it's just hate versus hate. And I just have this strong sense that you cannot solve these problems with more hatred. You have to go in there with your greatest humanity and try to fix this stuff. There's only one of them I would really consider to be friends with, and that's Meep Sheep. I would probably prefer not to be in contact with the others, and maybe I will distance myself over time. I felt a responsibility to represent them and to represent their views, because I feel that, you know, if you want to solve this problem, you have to go right to the root of it. Like if you want to pull a weed out, you have to pull it from the roots, and we're not going to be able to solve this if we don't understand it. They are very proud of the book, the trolls that are interviewed in there, which I find surprising, but what that means is that they feel represented by it. And I think that's something that I'm glad about. I'm glad that I wasn't so one-eyed and wasn't so lefty feminist. I'm happy that I was able to go in with radical empathy to the point where I was able to represent their views and they feel heard, because that's the start of this thing. That's the start of unraveling this. I actually think there's a lot of hope in that book, although it's so dark. The thing that I lost my faith in isn't humanity. It was actually journalism, I have to say, because I think the trolls are right about journalism a lot of the time. We're not doing our jobs properly. We are often propagandists. We're not listening properly. We're not asking the right questions. We're not listening to the right people. We're not even finding the right people a lot of the times. Like, would they be so angry if we were listening to them?
That's it this week for Trending. My thanks to author and journalist Ginger Gorman, to James Beard, who recorded and mixed this programme, and to production manager Shannon McCormack. You can use our social media outlets, Facebook or Twitter, to get in touch, or if you want to message me with story ideas or thoughts on our programmes, then please feel free. My Twitter handle is @the_Anisa Subedar. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of Trending. Thanks for listening.